Hello, and welcome to Horror Drift Stories. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel in the dark. If you enjoy slow, eerie stories that stay with you long after they end, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell. And a little note before we begin, you might notice a few short ads in the first 10 minutes. After that, it's completely ad-free. Just you, the silence, and the story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights, and let's drift into the darkness. Story 1. I opened my eyes to the weak morning light slipping through the curtains. I had no idea how long I had been lying there, or how much I had drunk the night before. I only knew that I had barely slept. Every time I started to drift off, fear dragged me back up. I was too afraid to really sleep, too afraid of what my mind would show me if I let it go. Every thought kept circling back to one person, my son. I forced myself out of bed and sat there for a few seconds with both feet on the floor, trying to steady myself. My whole body felt heavy. My head throbbed. The room smelled stale, like sweat, old whiskey, and the kind of silence that settles into a house after grief has lived there too long. But I knew I could not stay there any longer. If I was going to go back out into those woods, I had to do it now. When my son left that morning, I had no idea it might be the last time I would see him. He had been so excited about that trip. He had been talking about it for months, planning every little detail with his friends. He had just finished high school. He had worked hard, kept his grades up, and even picked up a part-time job to help with bills around the house. He was a good kid. He still is, in my mind. And I am the kind of father who let that good kid walk straight into those woods. I stood in the hallway for a long moment before leaving the house, staring at all the pictures hanging on the wall. Pictures of birthdays, school events, fishing trips, camping weekends, Christmas mornings. Every single one of them felt different now, ruined. It was like something had changed in his eyes in all those photos. Or maybe it was me. When I looked at him now, all I could feel was guilt, shame, regret. It sat in my chest like a stone I could not swallow and could not spit out. I knew that if I didn't go back out there, I would never forgive myself. I wouldn't be able to call myself his father. I wouldn't even be able to call myself a man. But before I left, I wanted to leave something behind, just in case I didn't come back. My son had gone on that camping trip right after graduating. It was all he talked about for weeks. Ever since he was little, he had loved the outdoors. We used to go camping together when he was young. And once he got his first taste of sleeping under the stars, that was it. Every time we got home, before I even had both feet in the house, he would already be asking when we could go again. He loved the woods, loved the quiet, loved the smell of pine and damp earth, loved all of it. As he got older, though, life changed. I worked more. Sometimes I worked all night. Sometimes I came home just as he was getting ready for school. There were stretches where we barely saw each other except in passing. He never held that against me, at least not openly. I wouldn't have blamed him if he had. Still, every birthday, I made sure to take him camping, even if it was only for a night or two. I wanted to hold on to that. I wanted to keep giving him those memories, because there was nothing like seeing him smile in the woods. That morning, before he left, I gave him something that meant more to me than money could explain. It was an old watch. My father had given it to me when I was around my son's age. Over the years, it had worn down badly. The face was scratched, the band was damaged, and it hadn't worked in a long time. A few months earlier, I had paid to get it repaired and cleaned. When I held it afterward, shining again for the first time in decades. I knew I wanted him to have it. So just before he walked out the door with his backpack, I handed him the little box. The look on his face is something I still see clearly. It was surprise first, then happiness. Real happiness. He opened it, looked down at the watch, and then hugged me before I could say anything else. I remember giving him the same speech I always did. Just remember, I started. He cut me off and grinned, already knowing the list by heart. Camp somewhere safe with signal. Keep my phone on, and call you at least once a day. I nodded. Good, and don't drink too much. I don't need you coming back here smelling like a brewery. He gave me that half-convincing look only teenagers can give. There's not going to be any drinking, Dad. Uh-huh, I said. Just go easy, okay? He smirked. Will do, Dad. I messed up his hair, told him to be careful, and watched him walk out the door. I didn't tell him. I should have. That is the thought that keeps coming back to me. I didn't warn him. I didn't tell him what those woods were like, or what I feared might be in them, or why some old places should be left alone after dark. I kept that to myself because I thought it would only scare him, because I thought I was being sensible, because I told myself stories like that belonged in the past. As the sun went down that Saturday, my phone rang. It was him. Hey, kiddo, I answered. You all right? I could hear the excitement in his voice immediately. Yeah, Dad, all good. Just wanted to let you know we made it. We got the tents up. You should see it out here. The forest looks amazing. It's been cool all day. I smiled without meaning to. I could picture him standing there with his friends, proud of their campsite, probably waving his free hand around while he talked. Yeah? Bet all that shade feels good. I've been sweating my ass off here all day. He laughed. That sound hurts to remember now. We talked a little more. He said they'd probably stay one more night and head back the next afternoon. I told him maybe we could order dinner when he got home. He liked that idea. Then I told him to have fun. Bye, Dad, he said. Bye, son. I didn't know that would be the last time I heard his voice. The next day, I got up and started doing all the things I had put off. Cleaning up, running errands, thinking about what food to order later when he got home. As the afternoon dragged on, I kept waiting for another call. I expected a quick update, a message saying they were packing up, maybe a call to tell me they were on the road. Nothing came. At first, I tried not to overthink it. Then, the sun started dropping lower, and that feeling in my stomach started tightening. It was the kind of feeling you can't explain to someone else. Just that deep sense that something is wrong, and has been wrong for a while. Eventually, I gave in and called him, straight to voicemail. I left a message trying to sound normal. Told him to call me when he got this. Told him to let me know when he was heading back. An hour passed. I called again. Voicemail. Then again. Voicemail. At some point, time stopped making sense. 20 minutes felt like hours. Seconds dragged. Every time I heard that automated message asking me to leave another voicemail, the dread inside me grew worse. I started calling the other parents, one after another. Every single one of them was in the same position I was. No calls, no replies. Straight to voicemail. They all tried to calm me down, and I tried to calm them down. We all put on the same fake voice, the same weak smile you can hear through a phone. They're probably fine. They probably stopped somewhere. Teenage boys don't want to be bothered by their parents every 5 minutes. But underneath all of that, we were scared. Every single one of us knew it. At midnight, I called the police. I wish I had done it sooner. I wish I had done a lot of things sooner. The police gave me the same tired answer people always give in these situations. He had only recently turned 18. He was legally an adult. He had not been gone long enough. They said I had to wait 48 hours before filing a missing person report. 48 hours. I remember gripping the phone so hard my hand hurt. I wanted to scream at them. Wanted to ask them if they would say the same thing if it were their kid out in the woods. Unreachable, silent, gone. Instead, I hung up, grabbed my keys, and drove out there myself. The whole ride to the forest, I tried to fight off the worst thoughts. Maybe the boys got stuck. Maybe the truck broke down. Maybe they had no signal. Maybe. My mind kept offering me softer possibilities, and I kept accepting them because the truth was still too big and too dark to look at directly. When I pulled into the parking area at the edge of the forest and saw my son's car, that last bit of hope started to come apart. I knew that car immediately. I had bought it for him just a few months earlier, after he got his license. He drove it like he had been born behind the wheel. Seeing it sitting there in the dark, empty and cold, broke something in me. I don't remember opening my own car door. I only remember stumbling out with a flashlight in hand and running into the woods like an animal. I shouted his name over and over. I called his phone again and again. At some point, I heard the ringing. Hope came back for just a second. Then I found the phone lying on the ground. No son, no boys, just the phone lighting up and vibrating while I stood there in the dark. I was out there for hours after that. I searched until my legs shook. I screamed his name until my throat was raw. I prayed to anything that might be listening, begged, pleaded, promised. I looked for blood, footprints, broken branches, torn fabric, anything. Nothing. No trace. I went straight from those woods to the police station. I barely remember driving back. I only remember the anger. I kicked through the station doors and demanded a search party. The other parents showed up too. By morning, the whole thing had made the news. Over the next few days, search teams flooded the forest. Police, volunteers, reporters, drones, search dogs, everyone. Still nothing. No trace. As the days turned into weeks, the news lost interest. I actually heard one reporter call the story played out. That phrase still makes my hands shake. Played out, like my son's disappearance was some story arc that had run too long. Like people had simply grown bored of our pain. Search parties got smaller. Families started to lose hope. Some people stopped coming altogether. Some of the other parents started talking about memorials and funerals, and how maybe it was time to accept what had happened. I couldn't. Accept what? Bury what? An empty box? A memory? No. So I kept going back. And now, here I was again, heading out there alone. By then, the campsite had been trampled over so many times, it barely looked like a crime scene anymore. The police had officially gone cold on the case the week before. The season had changed, too. A cold fog now crawled between the trees, making the woods feel even less real. The other families had mostly stopped coming. Their hope had finally died. Mine hadn't, or maybe mine had just turned into something else. I walked through the old campsite again, checking the same spots I had checked 100 times before. But that day felt wrong. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I knew that feeling. I had felt it on every search. Something was watching me. Before, it had always felt distant, like being mocked from far away, like something out there knew more than I did and enjoyed that. But that day, alone in the fog, it felt different, sharper, meaner. It wasn't mockery anymore. It was hunger. A branch snapped somewhere behind me. I spun around just in time to see movement between the trees. A shape. Dark and quick. "Hey!" I shouted before I even knew what I was doing. Then I ran after it. I pushed through the trees and fog, chasing that shape until it stopped ahead of me. As I got closer, I realized it was only a deer. A deer standing perfectly still. I actually felt my shoulders drop for a second. Relief. Embarrassment. I had scared it, I thought. I was the one acting crazy out there. I took another step toward it. The deer didn't move. I raised my binoculars, just to get a closer look. It was stupid, maybe, but I wanted something normal, something harmless. I looked through the lenses and saw its eyes clearly. Its pupils were huge. It was terrified. I lowered the binoculars just in time to see long black strands descend through the fog from above the deer. Then came a neck, stretching downward far too far, far too long, far beyond what should have been possible. Its face pushed through the curtain of black hair. It was longer than a horse's face, pale and wrong, with two tiny white eyes near the top of its skull fixed on the deer with pure killing intent. I froze. Its jaw opened with a wet, popping sound. Then the lower part of its mouth lunged forward and swallowed the deer in one horrible motion, like a snake taking prey whole. 1 second the deer was there, and the next it was gone. No blood, no crunching, no struggle after that first broken cry. Just gone. My hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped the binoculars. I took a step backward. Then another. I was trying so hard not to make a sound that I misstepped onto a fallen branch. It snapped. That tiny sound was enough. The creature's wide eyes turned toward me. It looked at me directly now, and somehow its thin mouth seemed to lift into something like a smile. Then its face snapped back upward into the trees so fast I almost doubted I had seen it at all. Then came the noise above me, branches breaking one after another, racing through the canopy. It was moving toward me. I ran. I don't know how long I ran. The fog made it impossible to see far. I followed trail markers where I could. Stumbling, slipping, lungs burning, the sound above me kept pace, crashing through the trees like something huge and patient and certain of where I was going. Then I hit a branch with my shoulder and went down hard. I landed on my back and looked up. That was when I saw the rest of it. Its arms were long and sloth-like, wrapped around trunks as it moved through the upper forest. Its claws were enormous, curved around whole trees. Its body hung beneath it like a swollen sack. The skin of its belly was stretched thin and almost transparent. Inside, I could see shapes floating, the deer, and something else, something metallic. My son's watch. It floated in the bile inside that thing's body, shining faintly. That single sight broke me more than anything else. The creature lunged downward at me, mouth opening again, trying to scoop me up. I rolled just in time and scrambled to my feet. Then I ran harder than I've ever run in my life. I burst through the tree line and crashed against my car, shaking so hard I could barely fit the key into the door. When I finally looked back toward the woods, I could still see it faintly high among the trees, two white eyes staring down at me from the fog. And then I screamed. I screamed all the way home. I screamed until my throat gave out. I hit the steering wheel until my knuckles split. I cried so hard I could barely see the road. All that time, all those searches, all those people combing the woods below the treetops. Why didn't we look up? That is why I am writing this now. I am going back. I know what took those boys. I know what took my son. I know it is still out there, and I know it remembers me. That thing does not kill quickly. It does not hunt out of hunger alone. It enjoys it. It drags things out. It digests slowly. It is patient. But I am not. I am taking my hunting rifle back into those woods. Maybe I won't survive. Maybe I'm a fool. Maybe I should have stayed home and grieved like everyone wanted me to. But I can't. Not after what I saw. Not after seeing that watch inside its stomach. Not after knowing part of my son is still in there. I'm going back to get the last thing I can from it. A piece of my son. A trace. Story 2. The command prompt appeared on my laptop's home screen out of nowhere. I know that does not sound dramatic at first, but it unsettled me immediately. I had not opened anything strange. I had not clicked any weird links. I was just using the laptop like normal. And then suddenly there it was, sitting on the screen like it had every right to be there. At first I thought maybe the computer had glitched. Then I thought maybe someone had hacked it. I did not know much about computers beyond the basics, but I knew enough to understand that random command prompts were not a good sign. The whole thing felt wrong in a way I could not explain. It was not just unexpected. It felt personal. The prompt had a message in it. It asked me a question. I remember staring at the screen and feeling this strange pressure in my chest as I read it, because the wording made no sense. I cannot even explain why it creeped me out so much at the time. Maybe it was because it sounded like someone was already in the middle of a conversation with me. Maybe it was the fact that it used a name I did not recognize. Who was Jacques? The prompt left an empty field underneath the message, waiting for me to respond. That was the strangest part. It did not look like an error message. It did not look like some system process. It looked like it wanted an answer from me. I should have shut the laptop right then. I know that now, but at the time, curiosity got the better of me. Fear and curiosity usually travel together. One pushes you away while the other pulls you closer. That night, curiosity won. So I typed a reply. No. The second I hit enter, the prompt vanished. Just like that. The screen went back to normal, as if nothing had happened. My usual desktop, my files, my open tabs, everything looked fine. If someone had walked into the room at that moment, I would have had no proof that anything strange had happened at all. For a while, I tried to convince myself it was some weird software problem. Maybe a bug, maybe malware, maybe a prank. I told myself there had to be a normal explanation. People do that when something scares them, and they do not have enough information to understand it. They grab the most ordinary explanation they can and hold on to it until it breaks apart. Nothing else strange happened for months. The laptop slowed down sometimes, but it had been doing that already. It froze now and then, but again, it was not a new machine. I kept using it for school, streaming, notes, whatever I needed. The weird command prompt drifted into the back of my mind, where I kept all the uncomfortable things I did not want to think about too much. Then, 4 months later, it happened again. I was in my room doing homework when the command prompt suddenly appeared over everything else. No warning, no sound. 1 second I was staring at an assignment, and the next that black little box was sitting in the middle of my screen again. This time the message was different. Did you see me earlier today? I froze. I read it once, then again, then again. The words made even less sense than the first time. See who earlier today? See what? I had no idea how to answer. My hands were already starting to sweat, but I still typed back. See you where? I hit enter. The response came at once. Underneath your bed. Every muscle in my body tightened. A cold feeling shot down my back so fast, it almost hurt. I had this horrible instinctive reaction, the kind you get before your mind can even form a proper thought. I did not want to look. I absolutely did not want to look. But I also could not stop myself. Very slowly, I leaned over the edge of my bed and looked underneath. I wish I had not. I did not see boxes, or shoes, or dust, or any of the normal things that should have been there. I saw darkness, not regular shadow, not just a dim space. It looked like a deep black void, like the space under my bed had opened into something much larger than it should have been. I remember the way the darkness seemed too complete, too flat, and too endless at the same time. Then, I felt a cold rush of air hit my face. I jerked back so fast, I nearly fell off the bed. My heart was pounding so hard that it made my chest ache. I turned back to the laptop with my fingers shaking over the keyboard. You aren't underneath my bed. I stared at the screen waiting for the reply. It came instantly. Not anymore. Now, I'm inside you. The nausea hit me all at once. It was so sudden and so intense that I barely had time to grab the trash can beside my bed before I threw up. My head was spinning. My stomach felt twisted. My skin had gone cold and damp. It was not just disgust or fear. It felt like my body had reacted to something before the rest of me could understand it. When I was done, I slammed the laptop shut. I sat there breathing hard, trying to think. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself I was tired, stressed, overwhelmed, maybe getting sick. There had to be an explanation. There had to be. I could not let myself believe that something had spoken to me through my laptop and then claimed to be inside me. I needed to disconnect from everything, so I turned off the lights and lay down in bed. I did not sleep, at least not at first. I just lay there in the dark, listening to my own breathing, and trying not to look at the closed laptop on the other side of the bed. Every few seconds my mind drifted back to the same questions. What was Jacques? Why that name? Why me? What had I seen under the bed? Had I really seen anything at all? Then I heard it. Hi, I'm Jacques. Do you want to play? I sat straight up in bed. The voice had not come from the laptop. It had not come from the room. It came from inside my head. I know how that sounds. I know exactly how it sounds. If someone else told me that, I would think they were having a breakdown or a psychotic episode. Maybe that is what was happening to me. I considered that possibility more than once. But the voice was clear, calm, childlike almost, friendly in a way that made it worse. No, I don't want to play. I do not know if I said that out loud or only thought it. I just know I answered. Then I sat there in terror, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. The room stayed quiet, but I could not stop looking at the laptop. Even though the voice had come from inside my head, I was sure it had something to do with that machine. The two things felt connected. I cannot prove why I believed that. It was just instinct. That laptop felt contaminated somehow. Like opening it again would mean inviting whatever this was to become stronger. So that very night, I destroyed it. I did not do anything clever. I did not call a technician or run scans or back up files. I just destroyed it. I smashed the screen, broke the keyboard, cracked the shell. I kept going until there was no chance of turning it back on. Better safe than sorry. And for a while, it seemed to work. For the next 4 months, I heard nothing from Jacques. No voice, no strange messages, no impossible shadows, nothing. My life went back to normal. Normal enough anyway. I was still uneasy. I still thought about it more than I wanted to. Sometimes I would catch myself staring under my bed before going to sleep. Sometimes I would wake in the middle of the night and lie still, waiting to hear that voice again. But it never came. Eventually, I started to think maybe I had been right to destroy the laptop. Maybe there had been something on it. Some kind of weird malware mixed with stress and panic. Maybe I had scared myself into hearing things. The human mind can do ugly things when fear gets deep enough. I started leaning into that explanation because the alternative was unbearable. Then one day, I was sitting in a college lecture hall, and everything started again. It was a large chemistry lecture. I had barely been paying attention. The professor was talking about something on the board, and I was halfway between boredom and exhaustion, like everybody else in the room. The hall was full. Students all around me. Fluorescent lights overhead. The most normal place in the world. Then the professor stopped speaking. The room went quiet. He was staring directly at me from the front of the hall. At first I thought maybe I had done something without realizing it. Maybe my phone had made a noise. Maybe I had spoken too loudly to somebody beside me. I looked around to see if he meant someone else. He did not. "Sorry," I said. "Is something wrong?" He kept staring. Then, in a completely calm voice, he asked, "Did you see me earlier today?" A cold, tingling sensation crawled down my spine, the exact same one I had felt in my bedroom when that second command prompt had appeared. In that instant, I knew. I did not know how, but I knew this was the same thing. I'm not sure what you mean," I said. "See you where?" Not physically at first. More in the way a person moves when they suddenly stop pretending to be normal. He began walking toward me fast, not running, but fast enough that everyone in the lecture hall noticed. I stood up from my seat, without thinking. "Sir?" He kept coming. There was something wrong with his face. Not obviously at first, but wrong in the details. Too fixed, too intent, like his expression had stopped being natural and turned into an imitation. Then he reached me and grabbed me by the throat. Hard. I choked and tried to pull away, but he had a grip like iron. The whole room around us erupted then. Chairs scraped. People shouted. Somebody screamed. But it all sounded far away, because I was focused on the hand crushing my throat and the face inches from mine. "Hi," he said. "I'm Jacques. Do you want to play?" His mouth started to open wider, far wider than it should have been able to. I am not exaggerating. The jaw did not just drop, it seemed to unhinge. His mouth stretched open until it looked impossible. And deep inside that throat, where darkness should have been, I saw a bright light. It was blinding, the same kind of light that had moved across my room. My vision started to tunnel. My ears rang. I could feel myself blacking out. I do not know what made me think of the pencil. Pure instinct, probably. There was one lying on the desk beside me. My hand closed around it in what felt like the last second I had before I would pass out. Then I drove it into the side of his head. The pencil sank into his temple. The light inside his mouth vanished instantly. His jaw snapped closed. And then he collapsed. He just dropped. 1 second he was choking me, and the next he was on the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. I stumbled backward, gasping for air and clutching my neck, staring down at him and trying to understand what had just happened. Nobody in the room moved toward me at first. Everyone looked horrified. I looked at the guy sitting closest to me, desperate for something real, some confirmation that other people had seen exactly what I had seen. "Did you see that?" I asked him. He turned his head slowly and looked straight into my eyes. And then he said, "Hi, I'm Jacques. Do you want to play?" I ran. I did not wait to see what happened next. I did not stay to explain. I did not check on the professor. I did not speak to campus security or call for help, or do any of the things a reasonable person might have done. I ran out of that lecture hall and did not stop until I was outside the building. That is where I am now. Or at least, that is where I was when I started typing this. I left the building and found somewhere else to sit and write because I needed to get this down while it was still fresh. My hands are still shaking. My throat still hurts where he grabbed me. I can still see that light in my mind if I close my eyes for too long. And now I do not know what to do. That is the worst part. If this had only happened once, maybe I could tell myself it was some random psychotic break. If it had only been the laptop, maybe I could still blame malware and stress and sleep deprivation. But this thing followed me from one place to another, through months of silence, and then spoke through another person as if it had only been waiting for the right moment. So now I am trying to think logically, and every logical thought leads somewhere bad. If I go to the police, what do I say? That my professor attacked me and introduced himself as a name from a haunted command prompt? That a student in the lecture hall did the same thing seconds later? They will either think I am lying, delusional, or both. Maybe the professor will already be dead by the time anyone checks on him. Maybe he will wake up with no memory. Maybe the story will be twisted into something else before I can say a word. If I go to a hospital, what then? I tell them I heard a voice inside my head and saw a light inside someone's throat. That sounds even worse. They might lock me up for observation before I can figure out whether I am actually in danger or not. And what if Jacques can use other people? What if being surrounded by strangers only gives it more chances to get close? That possibility scares me the most, because if it can move from my laptop to my mind, and then from my professor to another student, then what exactly am I dealing with? Is Jacques a person? A thing? A name that belongs to something that wears people like clothes? Does it need permission? Does it spread by conversation? By attention? By fear? I keep replaying every part of this in my head. The first message, my answer. The thing under the bed. The voice in my mind. The months of silence. My professor staring at me. The light inside him. The student repeating the same words. Every time I go over it, one thought keeps coming back to me, and I hate it more each time. What if destroying the laptop did not stop anything? What if all I did was remove the first doorway it used to reach me? Because ever since that second message, the one that said it was inside me, I have not really been able to shake the feeling that something changed. I thought it was fear. Maybe it still is. But maybe that message was true in some way I still do not understand. Maybe the laptop was never the real problem. Maybe I am. That thought makes me want to throw up all over again. I have checked under beds since then, in dorm rooms, in friends' apartments, everywhere I sleep. Sometimes I tell myself I am being ridiculous, but I still do it. It is a reflex now. I always expect to see that impossible darkness looking back at me. So far, I have not. But I have started noticing other things. People staring a little too long. Certain pauses in conversation that feel loaded even when they should not. The way somebody's face can seem almost unfamiliar for a split second if I catch them at the wrong angle. I do not know whether that is paranoia or pattern recognition. Once your mind locks onto the possibility that something is wearing human beings from the inside, everybody starts to look uncertain. That is why I'm writing this now, because I need someone to read it and tell me what the next move is before I make the wrong one. I do not know whether I should run, hide, go to the police, check myself into a hospital, find a priest, burn every device I own, or sit in the middle of a crowded place where nobody can get close without witnesses. I do not know whether I am in danger because it is hunting me, or whether everyone around me is in danger because it is using me to spread. I do not know if typing this is smart or stupid. For all I know, answering that first prompt was the real mistake. Maybe that was all it needed. Recognition. Engagement. Maybe all of this started because I responded. If that is true, then I need to be careful even now. So if anyone reading this knows anything about possession, parasites, mass hallucinations, cursed messages, whatever category this nightmare falls into, tell me, please, and tell me fast, because I just looked up from the screen for a second, and the guy sitting across the room from me has been staring at me this whole time. He just smiled, and I think I already know what he is going to say. Story 3. The thing appeared 3 weeks after the 7th one. I first noticed it on a Tuesday morning while I was walking to my car. At first, it was only a shape behind me, maybe 40 feet back on the sidewalk, moving at the same speed I was. It was the kind of thing most people would blame on tired eyes, bad light, or a mind that had not fully woken up yet. But I sleep well. I always have. I am not someone who lies awake at night, replaying mistakes, or worrying about tomorrow. I turned and looked at it properly, and there it was, beneath the weak gray light of a street lamp. It had no skin. Its whole body looked raw, made of exposed muscle and slick red tissue that shone in the cold morning air. The tendons in its face moved under the surface with every motion, and its mouth was stretched open in what was clearly a scream. I could see that much at once. What I could not tell was whether I was actually hearing it. At that distance, I heard nothing. Maybe the sound was too far away. Maybe there was no sound at all. Maybe the thing was screaming in some way I was not made to receive. I stood still for a moment and looked back at it. Then, I turned around and kept walking to my car. I had a dentist appointment. That was the first thing I learned about it. It would follow, but it would not come inside. At the dentist's office, it stayed outside the building. I saw it through the window while I sat in the chair. It pressed what should have been its face against the glass and screamed in silence, those wet, lidless eyes fixed on me no matter where I moved in the room. Once, while the dentist was leaning over me, I glanced past her shoulder toward the window. Then I did it again a few minutes later. She asked if I was all right. I told her I was expecting an important call. The second time I saw it was later that week, around 11 at night. I had gotten out of bed to get a glass of water. When I stepped into the kitchen and looked down into the apartment courtyard, it was standing there between two bicycles. It did not belong in the shape of the scene. Everything else looked normal. The bikes were leaned against the rack. The security light above the side door flickered the way it always did. But there, in the middle of that ordinary little space, was that thing, staring up toward my window and screaming. Its posture was wrong in a way that is hard to explain. Some parts of it were too stiff, locked in place, like pieces of wood. Other parts hung too loose, as if the joints were unsure how much weight they were meant to carry. It moved like a puppet controlled by someone still learning the strings. I watched it for a few minutes while holding my glass. Then I rinsed the glass, went back to my bedroom, and got into bed. By the second week, it had stopped startling me. That probably sounds insane. I understand that. But when a thing shows up again and again, and every time it does exactly the same thing and never actually crosses the final distance, your body starts adjusting. Fear is expensive. A person cannot stay in a state of pure alarm forever. So eventually your nerves make room for the new fact of your life, and it becomes part of the background. I started paying closer attention to it. It was tall, perhaps 6'2", maybe 6'3", though its posture made it hard to tell for certain. Sometimes it looked taller, sometimes shorter. It never moved the way a normal body should. It could stand perfectly still for long stretches, then suddenly be much closer than it had been a second before. Not in a blur, not in a sprint. You simply looked away and then looked back, and it had crossed half the space without ever letting you see how. The screaming changed depending on distance. When it was far away, I could barely sense it, like pressure behind a wall. When it came closer, the sound, or what felt like sound, became sharper. One Wednesday afternoon outside a grocery store, it came within maybe 8 feet of me. That was the first time I smelled it. Iron, mostly. Blood. But underneath that, there was something sweeter and more rotten, like meat forgotten in a car on a hot day. I looked at it directly and said out loud, "Well, go ahead then." It screamed harder. Then I turned around and went into the store. That was the pattern with it. Always building towards something, then failing to complete it. Always gathering itself like it was about to act, and then stopping short as if some final step escaped it at the last second. It reminded me of someone trying to say a word they know but cannot quite remember. Mouth opening, mind reaching, then nothing. There was something in its face, or in the muscles where a face should have had a proper expression, that I kept trying to name. At first I thought it was anger, then pain. But neither of those fit. The closest word I found was desperation. It looked desperate, as if it needed something very specific from me and could almost reach it, only to lose its hold each time. Because of that, I began thinking more about the 7. I had killed 7 people by then. Quietly, carefully, over the course of 3 years. Each one different, but each one controlled. Each one kept small enough to disappear into the city's endless list of unsolved cases and missing names. A city is good for that. People vanish more easily than anyone wants to admit. Since the thing began following me, I found myself sitting with those memories more often. Not because I regretted them, mostly because I wondered if that was what had brought it. I would think of them one by one and wait for something to wake up in me. The feeling everyone talks about. Guilt, remorse, some weight in the chest, some sore spot in the mind. It never came. Carol was the 7th one. She had been walking her dog through the park in September. The dog ran when it was over. I sometimes wonder where it ended up. The woman from March had no name I knew. I left her apartment before sunrise and never looked back. The others were further behind them now, spread across bars, parking lots, side streets, and rooms that did not belong to me. I could still picture all of their faces if I chose to, but it was no more difficult than remembering furniture in an old house. People speak of guilt as if it is unavoidable, like gravity, like some force that catches up with everyone sooner or later. They speak as though hurting another person leaves a mark inside you, whether you want it or not. I learned early that this is not true for everyone. Some people are built around guilt. It shapes them. It keeps them soft, obedient, frightened, They cannot imagine themselves without it. Then, there are people like me, people who sit quietly, look inward, and find nothing there. I am one of those people. I think the creature understood that. In fact, I think that was exactly the problem. The first time it managed to come close enough to touch me was just before 2 in the morning in the park. I had been out late, and the evening had gone well. I was cutting through the path on my way home when I rounded a bend and saw it standing ahead of me. That was new. Usually it followed from behind or watched from a distance. This time it was in front of me, waiting. Its arms were slightly raised, as if it had rehearsed a different approach, and finally decided to try it. I stopped walking. It stopped too. For a moment we simply stood there looking at each other. Then it began moving toward me. I counted the steps. 7 of them. That detail stayed with me because it felt almost deliberate, though I cannot say why. After the 7th step, it stopped at arm's length. Its whole body was trembling. I could hear the wet sounds of exposed muscle shifting and straining inside it. The scream had changed too. It was higher now, more frantic. There was something almost human buried inside it, like the sound of someone crying so hard that speech breaks apart. Then it lifted one hand toward my throat. The hand kept coming. Slowly, shaking, I watched it reach, and then the hand dropped. That was all. Its arm fell back to its side, as if the effort had exhausted it. Its shoulders rose and fell. Something in my chest moved then. But it was not fear. It was not satisfaction either. The closest thing I can compare it to is the feeling you get when you see an animal trying to perform a task it was never built to do. A horse trying to climb stairs. A dog trying to open a locked gate. There is pity in it, but a comfortable kind. Detached. Mild. I stepped around it and went home. 3 nights ago, it stood outside my bedroom window, from midnight until sometime after 4 in the morning. I know because I checked the time several times. At that range, the screaming was no longer fully silent. It came through the glass as something thin and strained, half static, half voice. It was still impossible to make out actual words, but it had shape now. Rhythm. It sounded like language trying to happen and failing. I slept only in small pieces that night. Each time I woke up, it was still there. In the morning, I noticed something different. It looked smaller somehow. Not physically shorter, exactly, but diminished, like a fire that has burned too long without new fuel, like something that had been spending itself night after night and was finally running low. I went to the window and opened it. Cold air came in, so did the smell, wet iron, rot, distance and rain. It looked up at me and screamed. "You're not going to do anything," I said. "Are you?" It kept screaming. There was something miserable about it then. Not threatening, not powerful, just miserable. It had spent all that time, all that effort, all that fury trying to reach me, and it still had nothing to show for it. I looked down at it and almost felt sorry for it. "All that effort," I said. I almost meant it kindly. Then I shut the window and made myself eggs. Yesterday, it was gone. That should have been a relief, I suppose. But mostly, it was strange. I found myself checking for it without thinking. I looked down into the courtyard. I glanced toward the far corner of the parking garage, where it liked to stand when I got home late. I even walked around the block once before noticing what I was doing. The feeling that came with its absence was harder to name than I expected. It was not grief. Certainly not fear. The closest thing I found was mild irritation. Like discovering a television show you had gotten used to has been canceled without warning. You do not miss it, exactly. You just dislike that it ended without telling you. Tonight I am writing all this down because I want to place it somewhere outside myself. That is the only reason. I keep thinking about the way it stood in the rain those last 2 nights. Trying. I keep thinking about its hand reaching for my throat in the park and then dropping uselessly back down. I keep thinking about that desperate look in its face, about the possibility that it had come for something it could not take. Some part of me honestly finds that sad. All that purpose, all that drive, all that apparent certainty, and no real ability to finish what it came to do. It makes me think of the 7 again. Carol from the park, the woman in March, the others before them. I still go over them sometimes in my head, usually at night, not because I feel anything, but because I am curious whether I ever will. People promise that age changes you. They promise memory will harden into guilt if you give it enough time. They promise that one day you will wake up and the full weight of what you have done will be sitting on your chest. But I have waited 3 years, and then some. Still nothing. Maybe that is why the thing failed. Maybe it came expecting a door that simply is not there. Maybe it needed guilt, needed grief, needed some crack in the soul through which it could put its hands. Maybe it was built for people who break when shown what they are. Maybe it had done this before, many times, and each time the person on the other end eventually gave it what it needed. Panic, horror, regret, anything with enough weight to anchor it. And then it reached me and found an empty room. That is only a theory, of course. But if it is true, then I can almost understand the look it had at the end. Imagine being made for one purpose, drawn toward it night after night, only to discover that the one thing you require is absent. Not hidden, not suppressed, simply not there. What would that feel like? What would that do to a thing? Outside my window tonight, the street is quiet. My neighbor's dog has been barking at something down the block for the last 10 minutes. It is probably nothing. Dogs bark at shadows, trash bags passing headlights, and things no one else can see. The city goes on. Cars pass. People come home late. Somewhere nearby, a television is on too loud. Normal life keeps moving. The 7 are still dead. Wherever they are now, if anywhere, they remain there without me. Carol and the rest. I will probably think of them again tonight, the way I often do. Almost out of routine. I will go over their names where I have them, their faces where I remember them, and I will wait once more for the feeling that people insist must eventually come. It won't, and in a little while, the eggs I made earlier will be too cold to bother reheating. That is really all there is to say. That is the story. Or at least, that is all of it I have. Story 4. It feels strange to look back on my life a year ago and remember how simple everything used to be. Back then, my problems were normal. Work stress, rent, family stuff. Wondering where things were going with Amy. Small things, regular things. Now my life is built around one rule. I have to eat dinner every night at exactly 6 p.m. Not around 6 o'clock, not close enough, not 5:58, not 6:03. It has to be exactly 6 o'clock, and I have to truly eat. If I do not, there are consequences. Real ones, serious ones. I know how that sounds. On the surface, it does not even seem strange. Lots of people eat dinner at 6. Some families do it every day. But this is different. I do not do it because I am organized or disciplined, or because it is a tradition. I do it because I have been taught, very clearly, what happens if I do not. It started about a year ago. My family, wanted to celebrate me finishing my education as a dental technician. I had already spent time working in the field through internships and training placements. But now, it was official. I had the certification, the paperwork, the whole thing. I was finally done, and I had a couple of real job opportunities waiting for me. My mother was the most excited person in the family. She booked a table at a fancy downtown restaurant, the kind of place you had to reserve weeks in advance if you wanted a good evening slot. She went all out. It was not just going to be me and my parents. She invited my dad, my older brother, my grandparents, my girlfriend Amy, everyone. It was supposed to be one big, perfect family dinner. I was happy, but also nervous. It was the first time Amy was going to meet some of the extended family, especially my grandparents. Amy is not great with strangers. She gets quiet, and if she feels trapped in a conversation she does not want, she starts shutting down. I kept telling myself it would be fine. Everyone would be on their best behavior. It was my celebration after all. We got there around 5:30 on a Friday. I am not going to name the restaurant, mostly because I think it shut down later anyway. But it was one of those expensive downtown places that made every small detail feel like part of a performance. There was a raised terrace outside, 2 bars inside, and large booths for parties. When we got there, they did not just seat us. First, they had us remove our shoes. Then they led us to the table. Then they came around and washed each person's hands, one by one, right there at the table, because the first course was meant to be eaten with your hands. That was the kind of place this was. Just to be clear, I am not really that type of person. I am not into luxury or fine dining or any of that. I got into dentistry because I used to have a weird anxiety about tongues, and then I started reading about mouths in general to calm myself down. One topic led to another. Tongues became teeth. Teeth became oral anatomy. Oral anatomy became a career. That is honestly the only reason. I am not some refined food guy. I am the kind of person who is perfectly happy eating ramen noodles over the sink. So all the hand washing and scented water and dramatic presentation was a little much for me. Still, the night was going well. We had some drinks. We laughed. My mother bragged. My grandparents told stories. Amy clung to my arm a little, but she was doing okay. They brought out appetizers, including this shrimp dish served with dry ice that spilled over the table like stage fog. Apparently, the chef was famous. I had seen him on television before. Not enough to care, but enough to recognize his face. For the sake of the story, I will call him Chef Mike. We saw him moving in and out of the kitchen throughout the evening. People rushed around him constantly, and if you listened carefully, you could hear shouting coming from the back. He had that intense, celebrity chef energy even when he was smiling. As the clock moved closer to 6 o'clock, one of the waiters came over and placed a dish directly in front of me. Nobody else got one. It was some kind of halibut, bright and polished, and carefully arranged with vegetables and this little pool of foam beside it. I looked up and realized the person serving it was Chef Mike himself. "For the birthday boy," he said with a smile. "It's not my birthday," I said, "but thank you." "Then, what are we celebrating?" That opened the floodgates. My family started talking all at once. My mother sat up straighter and started talking about my future and my excellent dental health. My grandparents talked about how creative I was as a kid. Amy stayed close and smiled politely, trying not to get too overwhelmed. Chef Mike listened, then looked back at me. "Then you must have a refined palate," he said. "Please, it's on the house." At that exact moment, a clock chimed somewhere in the restaurant. 6 p.m., I took a bite. The halibut was good. Very good. I am not going to pretend it changed my life or anything. But it was rich and soft and balanced in a way I was not used to. The foam probably did half the work, but still, I liked it. It was only a few bites, but I enjoyed it. That was it. At the time, it felt like a nice gesture. A little personal attention from a famous chef on a special night. We finished dinner. We had dessert. Amy and I took an Uber back home. Normal evening. Nice memory. Then, later that night, I noticed that someone had sent me $80. There was no name attached, no message, no clue who it was from. Now, $80 is not some life-changing amount, but it was enough to make me pause. I assumed it was one of my parents or grandparents sending me a little extra as part of the celebration. So I thanked everyone in the family group chat. Nobody answered. That should have felt strange, but honestly, I did not dwell on it. The next day, I was home doing paperwork and eating ramen noodles with sliced bell peppers thrown in because I wanted to feel slightly less pathetic. At some point during the meal, my phone buzzed. $65. Again, no name, no note. That got my attention. I wrote in the family group chat again, thanking whoever had sent money and asking if it was some kind of joke or double payment. Nothing. No response from anyone. Over the next few days, I noticed a pattern. I did not receive money every day, but on the days I did get money, one thing had always happened first. I had eaten dinner at exactly 6 p.m. It took me a little while to realize it, because I was not testing it yet. I was just living normally. But once I noticed it, I could not stop seeing it. Ramen at 6 got me $65. Fried chicken and rice at 6 got me $70. The next day, I had the same thing with curry sauce and got $73. If I ate later or skipped dinner, nothing came. It was not random. It was specific. It also came fast. Very fast. Usually within minutes of finishing. That meant two things became obvious to me at once. First, whoever was sending the money was somehow judging what I ate. There was clearly some kind of rating system, because the amount changed depending on the meal. Second, someone knew when I was eating. Not later, not after seeing a post or hearing from somebody. They knew almost immediately. That realization sent me into a paranoid spiral. I checked the apartment. I asked Amy to look through the windows and outside by the parking lot to see if anyone was watching. I borrowed a heavy magnet from a guy who did magnet fishing, because I convinced myself there might be hidden devices on me or in my clothes. I tested corners, mirrors, vents, everything. Nothing. Amy started getting worried about me. She thought I was becoming obsessive. Maybe I was. One night, I locked myself in the bathroom to test it properly. I turned off the lights, hid behind the shower curtain, and ate a microwaved waffle with vanilla ice cream. At exactly 6 p.m., I sat there in the dark, feeling ridiculous and terrified at the same time, listening to every tiny sound in the building. The moment I finished, my phone beeped. $45. That should not have been possible. No one could have seen me. Not in the dark, not behind a curtain, not in a closed bathroom. So, I started experimenting in a more structured way. I learned that drinks did not count. Smoothies did not count. Slushies did not count. Jam did not count. Chips and crackers did not count. It had to be an actual meal. Something solid. Something dinner-like. Something that apparently satisfied whoever or whatever was watching. Then Amy helped me do something more serious. I bought a beautiful cut of beef from a butcher, and she prepared it with roasted potatoes and a truffle glaze. She wanted to test the system properly too. She made it feel like an event. Warm napkin, candlelight, a glass of red wine, everything. I ate alone at our table at exactly 6 p.m. When I checked my phone afterward, the deposit was $1,200. That was when this stopped being just creepy and became impossible to ignore. That was rent money, utility money, real money. Amy lost her mind with excitement. She was dancing around the kitchen, already planning what she could cook the next day. But I could not stop thinking the same thought. Where was it coming from? And why? Amy told me to ask. If someone is listening, she said, then just ask them. So the next night, while eating hot dogs and instant mashed potatoes, I tested that idea. I took a bite and said out loud, if you can hear me, add 50 cents to the next deposit. That would be obvious, because until then, I had only gotten full dollar amounts. When the payment came in, it was $21.50. Someone was listening. That changed everything. After that, I created a system. 50 cents meant yes, 25 cents meant no. Then I expanded it to multiple choice answers using different cent values. I started asking questions every night. Can you see me? Yes. Do I know you? No. Do you want to hurt me? No. The answers were clear, immediate, and deeply unsettling. Amy was fascinated too, though she never got answers if she asked the questions herself. It had to be me. Only me. When I asked if the watcher knew Amy was there with me, the answer was yes. I became obsessed. I made charts. I tracked deposits. I compared meals, ingredients, settings, plating, drinks, and timing. Home-cooked food got more money. Eating alone usually got more. Red wine was better than white wine, especially if it was chilled. A little more salt could increase a payment. Too much butter could lower it. I slowly realized I was not just being watched. I was learning someone else's tastes. And I was being paid to satisfy them. I even figured out that the watcher was somehow connected to South Dakota. That took days of slow question building and scent-based coding, but eventually I got there. North America, United States, South Dakota, east of the river, apparently, though not with complete confidence. The stranger thing was that some questions seemed hard for it to answer, like it was thinking, or remembering, or guessing. I got the sense it was not entirely clear on itself. Then, about 2 months after that first restaurant dinner, there was a knock on my door. It was Chef Mike. I recognized him instantly through the peephole. When I opened the door, he dropped the polished television chef smile and just said, "Have you been getting the payments?" That question hit me like a punch. I let him in. He told me he knew all about the arrangement. According to him, he used to receive deposits too, about once a week, if he made that halibut dish exactly right and served it at the correct time and date to the correct person. He said whatever this thing was had helped his career, that it had made him a lot of money. He called it our benefactor. He also said he had stopped getting payments after serving me that halibut. Apparently, the benefactor had taken a liking to me. Chef Mike wanted to cook for me regularly and see if he could start benefiting again through me. I should have told him to leave. I did not. How do you say no to a famous chef offering to cook gourmet meals in your apartment? Well, both of you get paid for it. Amy certainly was not going to stop me. She was practically glowing. She even liked his online videos. So, we agreed. That was another mistake. Very quickly, Chef Mike started changing my kitchen. New pans, new knives, new shelves, new ventilation, new spice jars, cleaning crews, assistants, sous chefs, random men who did not look like kitchen staff at all. Some looked more like hired muscle. Every time he came over, the apartment felt less like mine. The payouts jumped fast. $300 became normal. Then $1,000. Then $2,000. At one point, we hit over $3,000. Once, with a 4-course meal, he got it over $4,000. But having him around was awful. He had a terrible temper. He snapped at Amy constantly. She would be standing quietly in the corner, excited just to watch him work, and he would suddenly bark at her to stop staring, or move, or get out of the way. It crushed her. She slowly stopped coming into the kitchen on the days he visited. Meanwhile, I kept asking the benefactor questions. The most important answer I ever got came in pieces over 8 days. I asked, "How can you see me?" The answer came one set of cents at a time. U-R-E-Y-E-S. Your eyes. That answer disturbed me more than anything else. Your eyes. So it was seeing through me somehow, using me, looking out from behind my own face. I tried eating with my eyes closed. It made no difference. So that did not solve anything, but the answer stayed with me. After that, I started getting random little messages too, not just direct responses to questions. Good taste. Best tongue. More salt. Chef Mike admitted he had started getting strange scent patterns too, but he had never realized they formed words. We translated some of his together while he was cooking. Some of them said things like, "can't see," and "can't touch." So whatever this benefactor was, it could not see directly, and it could not touch directly, but it could see through me, taste through me. That was the picture I slowly built. Not a regular person, not a demon, not a ghost, not an alien, at least not according to the answers I got. Something that used to be human, maybe. Something now distant and hungry and strange. Something living through others. Then I learned why 6 p.m. mattered. I asked why it had to be that time. The answer was simple. Dinner. I asked why not 5 o'clock. Gym. Then more details followed. Work. Gym. Dinner. Woman. Sleep. That thing had a schedule, or had once had one. It wanted dinner at 6, because that was when dinner belonged in its life. The more I learned, the more disturbed Amy became. Eventually, she pulled me aside in the car one day and told me we needed to stop. She said it was too much money for something we did not understand. She said I was losing myself in it. She asked me if I still wanted to be a dental technician, or if I just wanted to sit around making charts and menus for a creature I had never seen. She was right. I hated that she was right, but she was. So I stopped. I skipped dinner at 6 o'clock, and then I kept skipping it. For about 2 weeks, I walked away from the schedule. No more deposits. No more Chef Mike. No more Post-it notes. Amy relaxed. We ate together at random times. Again, things started to feel normal. Then both Amy and I lost our jobs on the same day. That did not feel random. That night, while she was out, I made spaghetti and meatballs and sat down at exactly 6 p.m. with a question written in front of me. Did you get us fired? 50 cents for yes, 25 for no. Later that night, the deposit came in, $480.50. Yes, it got us fired. I never told Amy. She thought we had escaped. I did not want to ruin that for her. Instead, I decided I would make the benefactor hate me. One evening, while she was out, I sat down at 6 o'clock with the worst plate of food I could imagine. Orange juice, toothpaste, diced onions, and mayonnaise. I forced it down until I got violently sick. No deposit came that night. For the next few days, there were no deposits. I thought maybe I had done it. Maybe I had broken the connection. Things even started feeling lighter around the apartment. Amy and I made plans again. We talked about moving eventually. I deleted all my charts and notes and post-its because I wanted it gone for good. Then, one afternoon, I came home around 4 with groceries, and the front door was open. I thought Amy was home. I started talking while walking in, the way people do with someone they live with. Then, I looked down and realized the groceries I was carrying were not the ones I had bought. Someone had switched the bag while I was distracted in the parking lot. Then I looked up and saw a man standing in my living room. Tall, lean, glasses, buzz cut, gray coat. I recognized him vaguely from Chef Mike's place. He looked calm in a way that scared me immediately. We stared at each other for maybe 1 second. Then he ran at me. He caught me before I could make it to the door and slammed something metal and heavy against the back of my head. He blindfolded me, hooded me, moved me, shoved me, drove me somewhere. I could tell there were multiple people involved. I was taken down into some kind of cellar, chained to a table, and left there. Then a man sat down across from me and started talking. He told me about his job, about how years earlier he realized he could get paid for watching certain kinds of people, following them, looking closer, killing them. He made it sound almost casual, like he was describing a lucky career change. According to him, listening to this benefactor had saved him, given him purpose, paid him better than anything else ever had. Then the waiting started. At some point, they dragged Amy into the basement too. She was screaming, terrified, chained to the wall. When they finally took the blindfold off me, I saw the room clearly. 8 armed men. Amy chained up and sobbing, and 6 plates in front of me. A full meal. Appetizer, salad, fish, steak, slider, dessert, wine. At exactly 6 p.m., one of them nodded at me and said, "Bon appetit." I ate while Amy cried and begged. I ate while men with guns watched me. I ate while something inside me tasted through my tongue. At one point, they told the chef to leave and said I had 10 minutes to finish, or they would kill her. When I could not eat fast enough, a man shoved my face into the table, pulled out my tongue, and pierced it with a pop rivet. Then they started the clock again. I finished. Of course, I finished. Afterward, one of them asked me what time I would be having dinner tomorrow. It was not a real question. It has never been a real question since. So now, that is my life. Every day, no matter what I am doing, I stop and eat dinner at exactly 6 o'clock p.m. I still get deposits. Not as high as before, but enough. Sometimes more if Amy is in the room, quietly watching. We do not talk about that. We barely talk about any of this. We have built a life around avoiding the truth as much as possible. We talk about work, weather, groceries, rent, family, TV. Anything but this. But every day at 6 o'clock, I step away and eat. Because now I know what happens if I do not. And I know that whatever this benefactor is, it is not just watching. It is waiting. Story 5. The first time I heard it, I was standing in my kitchen with the refrigerator door open. I remember that moment very clearly because nothing about it felt strange until the voice spoke. The apartment was quiet. The only sounds were the hum of the fridge, the low buzz of the heat lamp in the living room, and the soft shifting noise of plastic containers every time I moved something on the shelf. I was looking for leftovers, half distracted, half hungry, when I heard a dry scraping sound behind me. It reminded me of scales moving across dead leaves. Then a voice said, very calmly, "Not that." I froze with my hand still inside the fridge. For a second, I honestly thought someone else was in the apartment. I turned around so fast, I knocked a bottle of juice over in the refrigerator door, but there was no one there. The living room was empty except for the old couch, the coffee table, the floor lamp, and the large terrarium against the wall. Inside it, Rocky lay in his usual spot, under the heat lamp. Rocky was a python. He wasn't even mine, not really. He belonged to my brother, who had asked me to keep him for a few weeks while he dealt with some housing issue. I had never liked snakes, but I agreed because I thought feeding him once in a while and keeping the lamp on couldn't be that hard. Most of the time, Rocky just stayed curled in the same place, thick and still, as if he were carved from some strange living rope. That night, he looked exactly the way he always looked. His eyes were half-lidded. His body was coiled under the warm light. His tongue flicked out once, then disappeared. I stood there staring at him, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. No movement. No sign of anyone hiding. No second voice. After a while, I closed the refrigerator, told myself I was tired, and walked away. I was uneasy, but I let it go. I even tried laughing at myself. It had been a long day. I had barely slept the night before. Apartments make strange noises. Heat lamps click. Glass shifts. Pipes knock. A person hears what they expect to hear. And maybe I had expected something that wasn't there. That explanation lasted less than 24 hours. The next night, I was in the kitchen again. I had poured myself a bowl of cereal because I didn't feel like cooking. I remember the spoon hitting the side of the bowl with that light little clink, the milk soaking into the cereal, the smell of cold sugar and stale apartment air. I turned around to carry it to the couch, and that was when Rocky lifted his head. Not quickly, not in a jerky or dramatic way. It was slow, smooth, deliberate. He looked straight at the bowl in my hand. Then the voice said, "Too much sugar." I dropped the spoon immediately. It hit the counter, splashed milk everywhere, and fell to the floor with a sharp rattle. I backed into the sink so hard that a glass tipped over beside me. Rocky did not move, except to keep looking at me. His pupils had narrowed into dark slits, and his body stayed perfectly still except for the smallest movement near his throat. I knew then that I had not imagined the first voice. I also knew, with the kind of sick certainty that makes your skin go cold, that the voice was coming from the terrarium. I barely slept that night. I kept every light on in the apartment. I sat on the couch with the television running, volume low, because silence felt worse somehow. Every time I glanced toward the terrarium, Rocky was there under the heat lamp, still and quiet, like nothing unusual had happened. More than once I thought about calling my brother, but what was I supposed to say? "Your snake is talking to me?" Even I knew how insane that sounded. I told myself maybe I was cracking under stress. Maybe I was hearing things. Maybe I needed sleep. But on the third night, I stopped pretending. I didn't even know why I did what I did. Maybe part of me wanted proof. Maybe I wanted to force the thing to happen again, so I could know for certain whether I had actually lost my mind. I made scrambled eggs, put them on a plate, and sat down on the floor in front of the terrarium. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Rocky was coiled in the same place, and at first, nothing happened. Then he lifted his head and looked at the plate. "You don't listen," the voice said. "You never listen." My whole body started shaking. It wasn't the normal kind of fear either. It was deeper than that. The kind of fear that makes everything feel wrong, like the room itself has changed. And you are the last person to understand it. I set the plate on the floor because I was afraid I might throw it. My voice came out weak when I finally asked, "What do you want?" Rocky's body moved in one long ripple from head to tail. The movement was smooth and slow, but it felt deliberate, almost thoughtful. "You feed yourself without thought," the voice said. "You feed me without thought. You eat what harms you. You eat what harms me." I stared down at the eggs. "These are fine." The python's tongue flicked twice. "Rotten." Something in me broke at that word. I pushed the plate away from myself so fast it slid halfway across the floor. I was disgusted, afraid, and so confused that I could barely think. Rocky just watched me. His eyes did not blink. His body did not shift. There was something deeply wrong about how calm he seemed while I was coming apart in front of him. I ended up throwing the eggs in the trash without tasting them. Then I checked the carton in the fridge, expecting maybe to find that they had gone bad. But the expiration date was still 2 weeks away, and they smelled normal when I opened the carton. I stood there in the kitchen holding an egg in one hand, staring at the trash can, wondering whether I had just let a snake convince me not to eat dinner. That was the moment the fear turned into something heavier. Because by then, it wasn't only fear of Rocky, it was fear of myself. Fear that maybe I was losing my grip, slowly and quietly, while still doing normal things like washing dishes and checking dates on food packages. Over the next week, the voice became more confident. It did not wait for me to look at the terrarium anymore. It spoke whenever it wanted. It spoke when I took bread from the cabinet. It spoke when I peeled fruit. It spoke when I filled a glass of water from the sink. Stale, bruised, too warm, too much. Wrong one. At first, I kept checking everything it commented on. I checked labels, dates, packaging, smell, texture. Some of it seemed ridiculous. Some of it seemed impossible. Rocky knew the contents of sealed packages before I opened them. He knew that milk had gone sour before I smelled it. He knew when produce was bad in places I couldn't see yet. Once he told me not to open a yogurt cup, and when I peeled the lid back, there was green mold under it even though the expiration date was still good. That was when I started feeling truly trapped. Because if I was hallucinating, then how was I hallucinating things that turned out to be right? But if I wasn't hallucinating, then what exactly was living inside that glass box in my apartment? The voice started talking about things it should not have known. It knew what I had eaten at work. It knew what I bought from the vending machine on my lunch break. It knew the sandwich I threw away after only 2 bites because the bread felt off. It knew childhood meals I had not thought about in years. Toast burned black around the edges. Soup with too much salt. Chicken cut into tiny pieces because I used to swallow too quickly. The voice recited details I had forgotten, and it did so with a level of certainty that made me feel watched in a way I cannot properly explain. One morning, while I was chewing too fast before leaving for work, it said, "You swallow like something is chasing you." I stood in the doorway with my keys in hand and just stared at the terrarium. I stopped eating in the apartment after that. For a while, I thought distance might help. I ate in my car. I ate behind the grocery store. I ate at work in the bathroom with the faucet running because the sound of water made me feel less alone somehow. It didn't matter. Every single time I got back home, the voice knew exactly what I had eaten. "You think distance matters," it said one evening. I had not spoken a word. "You think walls matter." At some point, I threw a blanket over the terrarium. It was a stupid reaction, but I didn't know what else to do. I thought maybe if I couldn't see Rocky, it would feel less real. The blanket muffled the light from the heat lamp, but it did nothing else. The voice came through the fabric as clearly as if nothing covered the glass at all. That was the same day I called my brother and told him to come get his snake. I didn't try to make the story sound normal. I was too worn down by then. I just told him the truth as I understood it. I told him the snake was terrifying me. I told him it was talking to me. There was a long silence on the line before he finally said he would come by the next day. I could hear in his voice that he thought I was joking at first, then unstable second. After I hung up, I sat down on the couch and pressed both hands over my face. That was when Rocky said, "You carry it with you." I looked up immediately. The blanket still covered most of the terrarium, but I could see the shape of Rocky's body underneath it, coiled and waiting. "What does that mean?" I asked. There was no answer. That night, I woke up to a tapping sound. Not cracking, not breaking, tapping. Slow, steady, almost polite. I turned on the lamp by the bed and looked toward the living room. The blanket had slipped halfway off the terrarium. Rocky was pressed against the front glass, his snout touching it. His body was coiled so tightly that it looked painful. His eyes reflected the bedroom light in two pale points. "You're changing," he said. My throat tightened. "What?" "You don't feel it yet." At that exact moment, a cramp twisted through my stomach so sharply that I doubled over. I told myself it was hunger. I had barely eaten all day. I told myself it was stress, dehydration, maybe too much coffee, maybe too little sleep. Then it happened again. This time it was lower, deeper, and different. Not a cramp, a movement. I pressed both hands against my stomach and stayed very still. My heart slammed in my chest so hard I thought I might pass out. Rocky watched me without moving. "It's almost ready," he said. I backed away from the terrarium until my shoulders hit the wall. "What is?" Rocky opened his mouth. Not all the way, not like a hiss, just enough that something about the shape of it resembled a smile. "What you're feeding." The world seemed to tilt. I felt something shift again under my ribs. Not my stomach, not gas, not hunger, something separate. Something moving inside me in a way that made every instinct in my body scream. I began shaking so violently I could barely stand. "No." Rocky lowered his head slightly, almost content. "You should sit down," he said. "It's going to want out." I screamed. I didn't mean to. The sound just tore out of me. I stumbled backward in blind panic. My foot caught the edge of the rug, and I went down hard. My head hit something on the way down, maybe the table, maybe the floor, and the room went black immediately. When I came to, I was on my side, drenched in sweat, with a pain in my head so bad it blurred my vision. For a few seconds I didn't know where I was, or what had happened. Then, I felt the pain in my abdomen. It was unlike anything I had ever felt. Deep, ripped open pain. The kind that makes you understand that something inside your body is no longer where it is supposed to be. I pushed myself upright. There was blood on the floor. There was something else, too. Fluid. Thick, slick, clear in some places, and pink in others. A trail of it ran across the floor from where I had collapsed toward the living room window. The window was open. The screen had been pushed out. And whatever had come out of me was gone. I don't know how long I sat there before I started vomiting. It came up in violent waves, burning my throat and making my whole body shake. I couldn't stop looking at that trail. There was so much of it. Too much. The room smelled metallic and wet and foul, like birth and rot and something reptile cold. Then Rocky spoke again. "It's gone," he said. "Out the open window." I turned toward the terrarium. For the first time since this started, I hated him with a clean, clear intensity that cut through the fear. Rocky was still inside the tank, coiled beneath the lamp, watching me like a teacher observing a slow student. I wanted to smash the glass. I wanted to kill him. I wanted to run. I wanted to wake up. Before I could do any of those things, someone knocked at the door. The sound made me jump so hard I nearly slipped in the mess on the floor. It was my brother. I knew it was him even before he called my name through the door, because he was the only person who would come over that late, and the only person I had told anything. I stumbled across the room, one hand pressed to my stomach, the other braced against the wall. Every step made pain flare through my body. I unlocked the door and yanked it open before he could knock again. He took one look at me and then over my shoulder into the apartment. I didn't even try to explain. "Get this damn thing out of my house." I said, my voice cracked on the last word. He pushed past me and stepped inside, and I could see the exact moment he noticed the smell, the blood, the trail across the floor. His face changed. Confusion first, then alarm, then something like disbelief as he followed the trail with his eyes to the open window. He turned to me. "What happened?" I laughed, or maybe sobbed. I'm not sure. It sounded ugly either way. "Your snake happened." He looked toward the terrarium. Rocky had not moved. Under the heat lamp, with his body coiled and his eyes half-lidded, he looked ordinary again. Just a large python in a glass tank. Harmless. Silent. My brother stared at him, then looked back at me. "Did you call an ambulance?" I hadn't even thought about it. That realization hit me almost as hard as the pain. I had been so deep in panic, disgust, and terror that I had forgotten the obvious. My brother pulled out his phone and started dialing while I slid down the wall and sat on the floor, trying to breathe through the pain. While he spoke to emergency services, I looked at Rocky one last time. He was watching me, and though he did not speak again, I knew with horrible certainty that if we had been alone, he would have. Even now, I still don't know what came out of me that night. I don't know how it got there, or how long it had been inside me, or what exactly Rocky meant when he said I was feeding it. I don't know if it had been growing every time I ignored him. I don't know whether it was something physical, something impossible, or something I still do not have the right language for. What I do know is that the doctors never found a normal explanation for the damage inside me. I know they kept asking questions I could not answer. I know my brother took Rocky away that same night, and I never asked where he put him after that. I know I moved out of that apartment within a week. I left half my furniture behind because I couldn't bear to stay there long enough to pack properly. And I know one more thing. Sometimes, when I am eating alone, I still hear that voice, very soft, very calm, telling me what not to choose. Story 6. This job was a nightmare, but at the time, it still felt better than having nothing. I do not even remember where I found the listing. I had been out of work for a while, sending applications everywhere, and most of them went nowhere. By the time I accepted this one, I was tired enough to say yes to almost anything. It was a call center job. Customer support, technically, though that title made it sound far better than it really was. This was not even the kind of call center where you helped customers from one company. It was more like a general helpline. Random people called in about random problems, and somehow It was our job to listen and respond. In just 2 weeks there, I had already heard more nonsense than I thought possible. People called for everything. Some wanted cooking advice. Some wanted to complain about things that had nothing to do with anything. It was like being trapped in a room where the whole world dumped its confusion on you, one call at a time. The office itself looked normal enough. It was just a big room filled with rows of desks, weak coffee, gray lighting, and people who all seemed too tired to care anymore. Thinking back on it now, that may have been the strangest part. Nobody really talked. Nobody joked around. Nobody complained in any normal way. Everyone just sat there, took calls, ended calls, and waited for the next one. It was like each person was locked in a little invisible box. On my last day's shift before they moved me to nights, my boss came over to my desk as usual. "Good morning, inmate number 17. Ready to work." That was Adam. He always used that stupid prison joke. Every morning, it was inmate this, inmate that, like he thought he was clever. The first time I heard it, I assumed it was just bad humor. By the 10th time, it started to feel like something else. He never said it with warmth. He said it like he genuinely enjoyed the idea of all of us being trapped there. He had this fake friendly way of acting, always patting shoulders too hard, smiling too wide, talking like everyone under him was lucky just to be in the same room with him. I hated him almost immediately. "Morning, Adam," I said, forcing a smile. "Yeah, I'm ready." "Fantastic, buddy," he said, slapping my back. "But listen, Lucas, you had a little problem yesterday. Remember? A problem?" "Well," he said, smacking his lips like he was trying to decide how to be generous, "you cannot just hang up on people. That is literally the job. We answer calls. We listen. We help. That is what we do. But I'll let it slide this time, since you're new." Then he leaned in a little and gave me that same terrible smile. "Oh, and starting next week, you're on nights. Probation's over. We need more people for the night shift." I stared at him. "Adam, No, but, Lucas," he said, cutting me off with a lazy wave. "Work needs doing." Then he walked away like he had just done me a favor. I muttered something under my breath after he left, something about him being an asshole. None of the others reacted. Not one person looked up. They just kept talking into their headsets, like nothing around them existed. That weekend disappeared too fast, and before I knew it, Monday night had arrived. I had one small hope as I drove to work. I thought maybe Adam would not be there at night. Maybe the night shift had a different supervisor. Maybe I would get one peaceful blessing out of the whole miserable situation. That hope died the moment I walked into the office. "Good evening, inmate number 86, Adam said with a grin, standing right there with a mug of coffee in his hand. "How are we feeling about your first night shift?" "Tired," I said, "but curious, I guess." "Ha," he laughed in that fake way of his. "It'll be great, buddy. Get to your station." I walked past him, already annoyed, but then I noticed something strange. My desk was occupied. An old man was sitting there. He was thin, hunched over, and looked like he might have fallen asleep at the computer. He wore glasses and had an old leather briefcase sitting at his feet. For a second, I just stood there, unsure what to do. Before I could say anything, Adam barked across the room. "Walter, wrong seat, old man." The old man jolted awake. "What? Where?" "I think this is my desk," I said gently. He blinked, embarrassed, then looked around. "Oh, yes. Sorry, son." He grabbed his briefcase and moved one desk over, shuffling as fast as he could. "Old bastard," Adam muttered under his breath as he walked away. I heard it. Walter apparently did not. I sat down, and the old man next to me turned and offered his hand. "Walter," he said, "what's your name?" "Lucas." His grip was thin and bony, but steady. For some reason, just hearing someone speak to me like a normal human being made me feel better. Everyone else on the night shift looked just like the day people. Tired, quiet, empty. But Walter felt different. Still strange, but different. Once I sat down and turned on my computer, he leaned toward me and lowered his voice. "First night shift?" "Yeah." He nodded slowly, then looked straight at me in a way that made me pay attention. "There's one thing you need to remember," he said. "And I mean really remember. Do not hang up. No matter what happens, do not hang up a single call." I frowned. "What?" "No matter who is on the line," he said, still staring at me. "You listen. You do not hang up." I gave him a nervous smile. "Walter, it's a phone job. Worst case, they fire me." He shook his head. "You don't understand." Before he could say more, Adam shouted from the middle of the office. "Attention, little mice. Shift starting." "Let's go. Just do what I told you," he whispered, "and everything will be fine." I smiled awkwardly, put on my headset, and waited for the first call. It came, almost immediately. "Hello, this is Lucas. How can I help you tonight?" Silence. I waited. Nothing. No breathing, no static, no background noise. Just silence so complete it felt deliberate. "Hello," I said again. "Is anyone there?" Then I heard it. A child laughing. Not a loud laugh. A soft little giggle. The kind that would sound harmless anywhere else. Hi," I said slowly. "Can I help you with something?" More silence. Then another laugh. This time, two voices. A girl and a boy together. My patience disappeared fast. I was already tired, already irritated, and I had no interest in babysitting prank callers at midnight. "All right, goodbye," I muttered, reaching to disconnect. A hand suddenly landed on my shoulder so hard I flinched. Adam. I had not heard him approach. "Lucas," he said quietly, "we do not hang up." "They're kids," I said, pulling off the headset. "They're just messing around. This is your job," he said. His face had gone blank. Not angry, not annoyed, just empty. "You listen." Then he walked away. I stared after him, unsettled by how quickly he had appeared beside me. I had not heard footsteps. I had not seen him move. One second he was somewhere else, and the next he was there. I put the headset back on. "I'm here," I said. "What do you want?" The girl giggled again. "So, what is it?" A boy whispered into my ear through the line. "We can play hide and seek." "That sounds great," I said dryly. "And you'll never find us," the boy whispered. "But we know where you are." I frowned. "What?" The girl giggled again. "I can see your light green checkered shirt," she said. "And your jeans, too." My whole body went cold. I turned so fast, my chair nearly tipped over. There was nobody near me, except the other workers. All taking calls, all acting normal. Then both children screamed together. "Got you." I tore the headset off and looked around wildly. Across the room, Adam was watching, not smiling fully, just looking. That was the moment real fear hit me for the first time. I tried to get Walter's attention. He was deep in a call, talking fast and quietly. When he finally looked over, I waved him closer. "What the hell was that?" I whispered when he removed one side of his headset. Walter barely reacted. "I don't know," he said, "and you shouldn't ask. Just take the calls." "What kind of place is this?" Before he could answer, Adam was suddenly beside us. Again, I had not seen him approach. "What's going on here, boys?" Walter immediately straightened. "Nothing, boss. Just helping the new guy." Adam looked at me, then smiled. "Everything all right, Lucas?" I swallowed. "Yeah, good," he said. "Back to work." Walter put his headset back on, without another word. I did the same, though my hands were shaking now. The next call came in immediately. "Hello, this is Lucas. How can I help you?" A tired man answered, "Hello, Lucas. Where am I?" There was something wrong with his voice. Not in a dramatic way. It was calm, but it sounded exhausted, confused, hollow. What? And I'm drifting. Where am I? I sat up straighter. "Sir, do you know your name?" "No." He sounded more curious than afraid. "Do you remember anything?" I asked. "No," he said softly. "It's cold, dark, endless. Maybe space." I almost laughed from stress, but I stopped myself, because his voice did not sound like a joke. It sounded like someone waking up somewhere impossible. "What day is it?" he asked. "Monday," I said automatically. "Almost Tuesday." He was quiet for a moment. "I see," he said. "Then why can't I remember my name?" I had no answer. I sat there listening to him breathe into the nothing on the other side of the line, and somehow I felt like he was farther away than any normal person could be. "Lucas?" he said after a while. "Are you still there?" "Yes." "That's good," he said, almost with relief. "I think the nothing is pulling me again." "Goodbye, Lucas. I hope we talk again." The line went dead. I just sat there staring at my monitor. I did not know which call had been worse, the children who could see me, or the man floating in darkness. Another call came in. I could not answer. I just let it ring. At the far end of the office, Adam was standing behind one of the women, completely still. She turned her head once and glanced at him. He gave her a smile. The second she faced forward again, his expression vanished. "Lucas," Walter whispered. "Take the calls." "What is this place?" I asked louder than I meant to. Walter looked nervous. "Please, just answer. I'm not doing this." The phone kept ringing. Walter reached over, accepted the call for me, and pushed the headset back onto my head. "Don't ever wish to end up on the other side of the line," he whispered. A woman's voice exploded through the headset. "Where's my leg?" I froze. "Excuse me?" "My leg," she screamed. Where the fuck is my leg? My head split open. My guts are hanging out. And my goddamn leg is gone. What did you do to me? I could not think. I could barely breathe. She kept shouting, swearing, demanding answers. Then her voice dropped. "I know who you are," she said. "I saw you leave your apartment today. Building C. 4th floor. Apartment 21. That's you, right?" That broke me. I ripped the headset off and stood up. "I'm not doing this anymore," I said. Adam was next to me instantly. I do not know how he kept doing that. But there he was again. His face was flat and cold. "You are going to listen," he said. "No." I shoved the headset toward him. Then you listen. Adam actually recoiled. For 1 second, real disgust crossed his face. Fuck that, he muttered. That thing's filthy. I grabbed my bag and walked out. No one stopped me. No one even looked up. I went straight home, got inside, and collapsed onto my bed fully dressed. I was exhausted, terrified, furious, and too numb to even think properly. I told myself I was done. I would never go back. Let them fire me. Let Adam rot in that office forever. I fell asleep almost immediately. Then I heard a voice. Lucas, wake up. Adam. I opened my eyes. I was back in the office. I shot up out of the chair so fast it nearly rolled away behind me. The lights were dimmer than before. Walter's desk was empty. Adam stood beside me casually wiping wet hands with a paper towel. What the fuck? Relax. Adam said, you fell asleep on your break. I stared at him. No. I went home. He smiled. No, Lucas. You don't go home until your shift is done. My mouth went dry. What are you talking about? He tossed the paper towel away and stepped closer. We know who you are, he said. We know what you did. Until you work off your time, you don't get to leave. Home, then back here. Home, then back here. That's how it works. My heart was pounding now. What did I do? Adam's smile widened into something hateful and satisfied. People like you always know. For a second, the room felt unreal. My thoughts raced. I searched his face for a hint that this was some kind of joke, some cruel trick, something explainable. There was nothing human in his expression at all. And then, like a knife sliding into place, one thought forced itself to the front of my mind. The reason I had taken the job. The thing I never told anyone, the thing I had spent months trying not to think about. I had not lost my previous job because of layoffs. I had stolen from the lab. Not cash, not equipment. I told myself it was not as bad as all that. I had altered records, covered mistakes, changed dates. There had been a patient case, a crown fitted wrong, paperwork that should have exposed it, and I buried the truth because I was scared. Someone got hurt, not dead, not permanently ruined. At least, I do not think so, but hurt. And when questions started getting close, I quit before they could pin it all on me. I told myself it was just panic, just survival, just one bad choice. I had spent months pretending it was behind me. Now Adam was standing there looking at me like he had read that guilt straight out of my bones. He leaned in. You don't leave, he said again. Not until your time is done. I looked around the office. The others were all still at their desks, talking into headsets, working. Some of them looked tired, some empty, some terrified. And for the first time, I realized something I should have seen sooner. Not one of them had ever looked surprised to see me. Not on day shift. Not on night shift. Not even when I walked out. It was like they had all seen this happen before, or were living through it too. I do not know how long I stood there. Adam just watched me, waiting. Then, a phone started ringing. Not one on the desk, my phone. The one in my pocket. With shaking hands, I pulled it out. There was no number, just one word on the screen. Answer. I looked at Adam. He smiled. Back to work, inmate. And somehow, against every instinct in me, I understood the truth. I had never really been hired. I had been sentenced. Story 7. It started so quietly that, at first, it almost felt unreal. It was the kind of silence that comes only after too many things go wrong at once, when the world seems to stop and hold its breath. For days, maybe even weeks before that, all of us had been glued to screens, reading the same endless news about borders, sanctions, military threats, and officials giving speeches that sounded serious, but still somehow distant. It had all been building for a long time. Every few months, there was some new warning, some new headline saying the world was closer to the edge than ever before. People online kept saying that this time was different, that this was the one we should really be afraid of. Most of us laughed it off, not because we were brave, but because we were tired. After everything the world had already survived, it felt impossible that one more disaster could really change things forever. We had lived through disease outbreaks, protests, supply shortages, storms, floods, fires, and all kinds of things people once said would break society apart. Somehow life had kept going, maybe uglier, maybe harder, but it kept moving. So when people said the world might actually end this time, it sounded like the same kind of fear everyone had gotten used to carrying around. That afternoon, around 4 o'clock, everything electronic died. It was so sudden and so complete that for a moment nobody understood what had happened. Screens did not flicker or glitch. They just went dark. My phone died in my hand. The television cut off. The laptop shut down. The microwave display disappeared. It was not like a normal power outage where a few things still worked or where you expected lights to come back in a minute. This was sharp and final. It was like something had cut a wire in the middle of reality itself. At first I thought it was only our building, maybe the whole block if we were unlucky. I walked to the window expecting to see other apartments lit up, or people outside checking their cars. Instead, I saw confusion everywhere. Windows opening, heads leaning out, neighbors stepping into the hallway with dead phones in their hands, pressing buttons that did nothing. Later, people said it must have been some kind of pulse, an attack that burned through anything electronic and left whole cities blind and deaf in seconds. But in that moment, we did not know any of that. We only knew the world had gone dark in a way we had never seen before. The sirens started not long after. It was not the kind of modern alarm people ignore because they assume it is a test or an accident. It was one of those old, long, wailing sirens from another age, the kind they used to talk about in school drills and old documentaries. I had not heard one in real life since I was a child, and even then, only in practice. It sounded wrong, broken somehow, like something rusted and ancient had been dragged back to life just to scream at us. My neighbor down the hall, an old man who used to teach history, came pounding on doors before anyone even knew what to do. He had this collection of old things from the Cold War, maps and books and equipment that people usually laughed about. He had always seemed like one of those men who lived too much in the past. That afternoon, he moved faster than anyone else in the building. He was yelling for everyone to get to the basement. He had some kind of radiation counter running on batteries, and he held it like a priest carrying a cross. There was no real discussion after that. People moved. We all rushed into the stairwell together, parents carrying children, neighbors dragging laundry baskets full of whatever they could grab. Someone had a cat wrapped in a towel. Someone else carried a cage with 2 shaking birds inside. A teenager was crying without making much sound. Nobody was yelling much. That is what I remember most clearly. The fear was too large for shouting. It had gone past panic and into something heavier. We crowded into the basement under the building, down where the pipes ran along the ceiling, and the heater made its usual low sound, before it finally failed too. It was cramped, dusty, and smelled like old concrete and damp metal. The old man's counter clicked steadily in the darkening room. It sounded almost calm at first, like a clock or an insect. He kept staring at it and muttering things to himself about ports and strategic targets. He said if it had started with a pulse, then the first strikes were probably on the largest cities, the military centers, the big shipping routes, the kind of places that connected everything. Nobody argued with him. Nobody asked how he knew. We just listened to the clicking and waited. After a while, the building shook. Not from a nearby explosion the way I would have expected. It was more like the ground itself had pushed upward for one violent second. The lights that had still been barely alive in the emergency system went out completely. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. Somewhere pipes groaned. Someone in the dark began praying in a whisper. The smell changed next. Concrete, dust, and something burned. Not normal smoke, something harsher. There was a tiny basement window set high in the wall, just enough for a strip of outside to show through. I remember looking at it and seeing a cloud rising where the city center should have been. It was towering and smooth and awful, shaped with such terrible perfection that my brain could not fully accept it. It looked unreal, almost beautiful in the most sickening way. I could not stop staring at it, and the fact that part of me thought it was beautiful made me feel ashamed and terrified at the same time. Then came another strike. This one was closer. The flash came first, bright enough to make the whole basement glow through cracks and edges, even though the window was small and dirty. The sound followed after, huge and rolling, shaking the door in its frame and making everyone in the room flinch. My ears rang so hard it felt like a knife had been pushed into both sides of my head. For a few seconds, I could not tell if the sound I heard was the explosion or my own voice, because I think I was making some noise too, without realizing it. We stayed down there longer after that, though time had already started to lose its shape. I do not know if it was hours or less. Eventually, some of us went upstairs. The world outside no longer looked real. The sky had a strange color to it, lit from beneath and beyond by fires that did not belong in any normal evening. Buildings that had always seemed permanent were gone, or mostly gone, or reduced to bent black shapes against the smoke. Flames burned in places where there had once been traffic and shops and people standing around with coffee cups. The air felt thick and hot. Every breath tasted metallic, like blood and pennies mixed with ash. There were shapes in the street. Some were people moving slowly. Some were not moving at all. Some were impossible to understand from a distance. Just dark forms half hidden by smoke and dust. The old man looked at his radiation counter and the thing started screaming. There is no better word for it. The clicks turned frantic and high and constant. He did not say anything more after that. He just started moving, and the rest of us followed because there was nothing else to do. I made it to where I had parked my car, or where it should have been, and found it twisted and broken. The windows were gone. The inside looked half melted. One tire had somehow fused into the pavement at an angle that made no sense. I sat down beside it and laughed, not because anything was funny, but because my mind could not hold all of it at once. That car had been so normal. It had been part of my everyday life. I had driven it to work, to grocery stores, to pointless errands. Seeing it ruined like that felt like the last proof that the old world had truly been ripped apart. I decided to head toward the water. I do not know why. Maybe because water felt like safety in my head. Maybe because open space seemed better than buildings and burning streets. Maybe I just needed a direction, and that was the one I chose. The bridge was half gone by the time I got there. Parts of it had collapsed into the river, and chunks of concrete were hanging in angles that looked impossible. People gathered there in groups and alone, and some of them went into the water. Not to cross, not to escape to the other side. They were just stepping in and letting the current take them. I remember one woman in particular because she was holding a child. She moved carefully, like she was stepping into a bath, not a river under a ruined bridge in the middle of a dead city. Then they were gone. No shouting, no struggle, just gone. By evening, the sky changed again. The colors overhead shifted in strange curtains and streaks, like lights moving behind smoke. We had all heard theories before. Little science facts passed around online about how big explosions could disturb the upper air and create strange effects. That night, all those theories became real. The stars were hidden. The sky felt broken. I ended up with a few other survivors in an old coffee shop that was somehow still half standing. The windows were cracked, one wall had partially fallen in, and the smell of burnt beans mixed with smoke and dust in a way that made me think of ordinary mornings and feel sick for missing them. We found bottled water, some crackers, and a lantern that flickered more than it shone. For a while we sat together and talked softly, because speaking quietly made everything seem a little less final. One man worked on the trains. He kept saying his family might still be okay across the water, maybe in a shelter, maybe in some old municipal building. He repeated it so many times that it sounded less like hope and more like prayer. A young woman kept rubbing her hands together and asking if anyone had seen the hospital. Another guy just stared at the floor and nodded along with whatever anyone said. We got an old radio working for short stretches. Most of what came through was static, bursts of noise, broken voices, and mechanical sounds. But one frequency kept returning with the same message. Do not drink the water. Stay indoors. Wait for instructions. It repeated in a flat, emotionless voice that made the words feel empty. There was no comfort in it, just orders spoken into a dead world. By the second day, people's minds were starting to break. One man began laughing and could not stop, even when it made him cough and choke. A woman kept saying she needed to call home, over and over, as if the problem was only that the lines were down and not that the whole city had been burned open. Someone else just sat with his face in his hands, whispering numbers. I started counting my breaths, in and out, in and out. I needed something simple to hold on to, and breathing was the only thing left that still obeyed me. The air kept getting worse, the taste of rot mixed with chemicals. Every surface had a fine layer of grit. Even the water bottles felt dusty by the time we opened them. I tried not to think about what might already be in my lungs. On the fourth day, trucks passed by, military trucks, or what was left of them. They were armored but damaged, covered in grime and burn marks. Men rode in them wearing masks and heavy gear that made them look less like soldiers and more like creatures built for some other planet. We waved. Some people ran after them. They did not stop. Not even for a second. They just kept moving east. That was when I think most of us accepted the truth. No one was coming for us. There was a little girl in the group, maybe 6 or 7 years old, traveling with her mother. At some point, she wandered over to me and handed me a flower she had found pushing up through a crack near the side of the building. Yellow, small, almost cheerful in a way that felt impossible. She told me it was for me. For a moment, holding it, I felt something close to hope, something still alive, still trying. Then her mother hurried over and pulled her away with a quick apology, and in the space of an hour, the flower started to wilt in the poisoned air. Far away, Flashes kept appearing on the horizon. The radio got worse. Frantic. Broken. It began throwing out words and warnings between the static. Pull back. Contamination. Agents. Exposure. There were bombs. Yes. But there were other things too. That much became clear. No one in the coffee shop said it plainly, but the fear in the room changed shape. Bombs were one kind of ending. Invisible poison was another. And something about the way people looked at the bodies outside made me think there was maybe a third kind beginning too. I found a piece of charcoal and started writing names on the wall. Friends, family, people from work, neighbors. I wrote them over and over so I would not forget them. I said them aloud while I wrote, as if speaking them could keep them alive in some small way. It gave me something to do, something that felt almost sacred. But the charcoal wore down, and eventually I was just dragging a black nub against rough brick. Then the dust started falling. At first, I thought it was ash, but it was finer than ash, softer, grayer, and it kept coming long after it should have stopped. It settled on everything, on the broken sidewalk, on the dead cabs in the street, on the abandoned bags people had dropped while running, on faces, on the yellow flower in my hand, on the old man's radiation counter, which had finally gone quiet. That silence felt worse than the screaming had. When the counter stopped, it was like time itself had given up. Like nothing was measuring the danger anymore, because measurement no longer mattered. We huddled under the overhang of the coffee shop and watched the dust bury the world, inch by inch. It covered the fires, softened the broken shapes, and erased details one layer at a time. It settled into hair, into mouths, into lashes. It made everything look old, even the things that had only been destroyed days earlier. I stopped counting my breaths. I stopped writing names. I just sat there and watched. That was when my mind started drifting back to before. Not to any one great memory, not to birthdays or holidays, or the big important moments people usually think of when they imagine losing everything. I thought about little things, worrying about milk, complaining about work, taking too long in the grocery store, checking my account balance, standing in line, watching stupid videos while eating dinner. The smallest, most ordinary parts of life suddenly felt holy. And the worst part was knowing that none of it was coming back. Not tomorrow, not next week, not after rebuilding. Gone. That was the real horror, waiting under everything else. Worse than the blasts. Worse than the poisoned air. Worse than the hunger and thirst, and the way people were slowly losing themselves. The true nightmare was understanding, with complete certainty, that the day before was not waiting somewhere ahead for us to return to. There would be no return. No fixing it. No waking up from it. Yesterday was dead. All that was left was today. And today did not end. It just stretched on and on, one ruined hour after another. As the dust kept falling, it hid the shape of the cloud, the fires, the bodies, the streets, the whole broken city. It softened even the memory of the siren that had started all of it. The world looked smaller under that gray layer, quieter, almost gentler from a distance, which somehow made it crueler. I closed my eyes and tried to picture the old world one more time. I tried to remember the sound of a fridge humming in the kitchen, the glow of a phone screen, a train passing at night, rain on clean pavement, coffee brewing, someone laughing because of something stupid, a normal day that nobody would have remembered if it had remained normal. But every time I tried, the image broke apart, and that cloud came back instead, rising smooth and impossible over the city. I think that was when I finally understood there was nothing left to wait for. Not rescue, not recovery, not forgiveness. Just the long, endless stretch of a world after the ending had already happened. And that was the cruelest thing of all. The bombs were sudden. The siren was brief. The flash and the shock and the fire were all moments. But this endless after, this slow breathing in, poisoned air while dust covered every memory of life, this was what remained. This was what the end really looked like. Not one loud final moment. Just the knowledge that tomorrow had been erased, and still having to sit through the rest of today.